This week's Parsha is Parsha Miketz, which is the 10th Parsha, the 10th Torah portion in the book of Bereshit, the book of Genesis. And in this week's Parsha, Joseph is finally reunited with his brothers in the land of Egypt. Essentially, Joseph's interpretations of Pharaoh's dreams in last week's Parsha came true, and there was 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. And during the 7 years of famine, his brothers were also suffering the effects of the famine. And so their father told all of the brothers, except for Benjamin, that they should go to the land of Egypt to get food where there was food. And so the brothers go to Egypt, and they are reunited with Joseph, although they don't know that it's Joseph. But Joseph recognizes his brothers. And Joseph decides he's going to test his brothers to see sort of where their loyalties are now, all of these years later. And through a series of different events, Joseph tells the brothers that they can go back to their father's house, but they have to leave one brother behind, and then they should return with Benjamin. If they want to reunite all of the brothers, they have to go home and get Benjamin, the youngest, who is Joseph's only full brother, and they have to bring Benjamin to Egypt, which their father had specifically told them not to take Benjamin to Egypt. And then they could release Shimon, who is being held captive, so to speak, in the land of Egypt. And so the brothers return to their father's house, and they tell their father that they have to bring Benjamin down to the land of Egypt, otherwise Shimon is going to be stuck there. And what's very interesting is, obviously their father is resistant. He doesn't want to lose Benjamin in the way that he lost Joseph, or that he thinks he lost Joseph. So he doesn't want Benjamin to go, and the brothers are sort of trying to convince their father that they have to let Benjamin go to Egypt, otherwise their family will starve in the famine because they're going to need more resources. And first Reuben tries, and he says, look, let me take responsibility for Benjamin, but that doesn't sway their father. And eventually Judah, who is sort of the tribe that's the head of the Jewish people in a way, says, okay, I will take the responsibility for Benjamin. I'm personally going to look out for him, and it will be on me if anything happens to him. And what's so interesting about that is the shift between last week's Parsha, when the brothers put Joseph in the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites, and this week's Parsha, where their brothers are trying so hard to protect each other and one another and to keep them all together and really in protection. And what's interesting is Judah, it was his idea in last week's Parsha to sell his brother to the Ishmaelites. Initially, again, we have Joseph who was in the pit, and they were going to leave him there to die. And then Judah says, well, what benefit are we going to get from him sitting in this pit? We could sell him. And that sort of led to this series of events. And then now this week's Parsha, just one week's Parsha separated, we have Judah who's willing to sort of put the blame and the responsibility on himself and look out for his other brother, who is of the same two parents as Joseph, the brother who they put in the pit. And it's interesting to me the shift in, again, the brothers' attitudes from last week's Parsha to this week's Parsha. And I think it's a pretty valuable lesson for us because, this is the last Shabbat in the 2019 calendar year. The next Shabbos is going to be in 2020 already, and a lot of people create New Year's resolutions, things that they want to do better in the year to come. And I think it's interesting because we really see the brothers having a change. We really see them changing as people and their values changing and maturing in a way from last week's Parsha to this week's Parsha, where now the brothers are looking out for each other and they're really focusing on keeping them together, both for their sakes and for the sake of their father. And so I think if they can have such a shift of we're getting rid of one of our brothers, we don't like him, to we're going to look out for each other, we're all we have, then so too we also can make changes in our lives from one week to the next, so to speak. But even if it's a gradual change, even if it takes years and years, the time that they put Joseph in the pit to the time that they reunited with him in Egypt is a span of many, many years. So enough years that they didn't even recognize Joseph at this point. So it might take us time, but we can make changes. We can change as people, as individuals. We can improve and become better. And so as we start this new year, as we start the 2020, which is crazy to say, as we start 2020, I hope that we'll all look for areas in our lives where we can make changes and improve ourselves and have a better outlook on life. And I wish you all a happy and healthy 2020 and a Shabbat Shalom.